Okay, let's talk about something we all deal with. That constant internal conversation you're always having with yourself. You know how sometimes it just starts to feel heavy? Well, this is your guide to figuring out why that happens and, more importantly, how to make it feel light again.
You know that feeling, right? It's like this subtle friction in your mind. It's not like you're in some big crisis, but every single thought feels like you're wading through mud. The next step, which you know should be obvious, is just foggy. It's this frustrating mental static you just can't seem to tune out.
And right here, this is the big idea, the game changer we're diving into today. That mental weight, it isn't a flaw in your character. It's not about you. It's a glitch in your operating system. It's a signal that your internal dialogue has become structurally unstable. So think of this as a system audit, not a personal failing.
So how does this mental fog even creep in? It's definitely not a sudden storm, no. It's a slow, quiet buildup of tiny, unresolved moments. By the time you actually feel the weight of it all, a whole bunch of these little mental knots have already tightened up just beneath the surface.
This is so important to get. That feeling of heaviness isn't a judgment. It's not a verdict on you, it's just information. Think of it like the check engine light in your car. It's a diagnostic tool, signaling that it's time to pop the hood and see what's going on, not to question your ability to drive.
See, this whole thing isn't about one big mental mistake. It's about the slow, silent accumulation of, well, it's like tiny pebbles in your shoe. Each one is a small, unresolved thought, a little mismatch that on its own feels like nothing. But over time, they create a friction that makes every single step feel like a chore.
To really get a handle on this, let's use a metaphor. Imagine your thought process not as a bunch of abstract ideas, but as a physical terrain, a landscape that you have to navigate every single day. When your mind is stable, when you're in that state of flow, it's like you're gliding on a perfectly smooth, flat surface. Thoughts just come and go with this effortless grace. And those little mental cues, a quick "got it" or a silent pause, they're seamless. They just confirm a clarity that's already there.
But what happens when a thought doesn't quite land right? You know, a half-formed idea, a fleeting doubt. Each one is like a tiny pebble dropped onto that smooth surface. By itself, you'd barely notice it, but they start to add up.
And as they pile up, that once smooth path starts to transform into this rocky, uneven terrain. And all of a sudden, you're not gliding anymore. Now you're stumbling.
And here's the real kicker. On this new, uneven ground, the simple mental shortcuts that used to help you now actually become obstacles. That quick little okay in your head is now a question. That brief pause feels like a moment of serious doubt. Simple thinking turns into this grueling uphill climb. And that's why a simple decision can suddenly feel so monumental.
So, how can you tell if you're walking on uneven ground? Well, it's time for a quick self-check. And remember, this is not about self-criticism. It's about self-awareness. It's about becoming a more skilled navigator of your own mind.
Just take a second and look at these signs. Be honest with yourself. Do your mental pauses feel like a period or more like a question mark? Are you constantly second-guessing your own thoughts? Does it just feel like you're putting in more effort for no obvious reason? How many of these feel true for you right now? Okay, your score here isn't a grade, it's just a guide. As you can see, if you checked off a few, you're probably in early drift. A few minor course corrections will probably do the trick. But if you checked off a lot, you're in significant drift. And that means it's time to pull over, reassess your route, and actively work to get that mental balance back before you totally burn out.
And this brings us to a really crucial insight, something we often get completely backward. We think we can use mental shortcuts to create a sense of ease, but it's actually the other way around. Stability is the foundation. Subtlety, using those shortcuts, is the result. It's a luxury you can only afford once that foundation is solid. You just can't build a skyscraper on shaky ground.
All right, so you've identified the bumps in your mental road. What now? Well, the good news is there's a clear path back to that smooth, effortless glide. So let's talk about how to pave the way to a clearer, lighter mind. Now, here's the paradox of it all. To lighten your mental load, you actually need to give your thoughts more room to breathe. Instead of trying to force them into a smaller space, you need to expand. Think of it like unpacking a super cluttered suitcase. You've got to lay everything out before you can repack it efficiently. The path to getting back on solid ground is a pretty simple three-step process. First, just pause the compression. Hit the brakes on those mental shortcuts that are making you stumble. Second, expand your language. Be more explicit with yourself. Instead of just thinking, I got to do that thing, actually say to yourself, I need to finish the report for the marketing team by 3 p.m. And third, just let that understanding settle. Give it a moment. It's kind of like letting the dust settle after a storm.
Once you've got your mental equilibrium back, you can start to use a set of what I like to call mental superpowers, a signal vocabulary that helps you maintain that state of clarity and ease. And these aren't magic tricks, they're precision tools for a well-tuned mind.
Let's start with the cornerstone of our signal vocabulary, the pause. I want you to think of it as your mental reset button. On a clear day when the ground is flat, a pause is a moment of calm reflection. But if that pause feels like a cliffhanger, that's a huge red flag that you're on shaky ground.
Next up is the observe signal. This is basically your mental pin it for later button. It's the art of acknowledging a thought without immediately getting tangled up in it. You know, a new email pops up while you're in the middle of a task. Instead of getting sidetracked, you just observe it and keep going, knowing you'll get to it later.
This here really shows you the precision of these mental tools. Acknowledge is like putting a period at the end of a sentence. It signals that something is complete and understood. Revise, on the other hand, is like using an eraser. It's a deliberate act of correction. Using one when you really need the other is a surefire way to create mental confusion.
And now for a really critical pair of signals: proceed and stop. You can only move forward with confidence when the path ahead is clear. The moment you sense that mental friction, that uneven ground, it's time to hit the brakes. And that's not a sign of weakness, it's a strategic move to avoid a mental pileup.
And this all brings us to the ultimate reward for doing this work, the power of compression. The ability to think in shortcuts, to communicate with yourself in a kind of mental shorthand. That's the prize you earn for establishing a stable, clear mind. It's really the final level of mental mastery. So let's close with this really powerful idea. This isn't about forcing your mind into submission. It's about cultivating a more compassionate relationship with your inner world. When you feel that mental weight, try to see it not as a burden, but as an invitation to expand, to clarify, and to rediscover the joy of a light, effortless mind. So what would be possible if you answered that invitation with kindness and curiosity?